Sweeney, and I am the chair of the English department, and I'm also a member of the creative writing faculty, and with those two hats on, I am happy to welcome you to tonight's instantiation of the creative writing, is there a noun? Creative writing series? Creative writing reading series here at the University of Notre Dame. And in addition to enjoying tonight's reading, I invite you to mark your calendars for all the readings coming up. Most immediately, next week we'll have a reading by Josh Foman and our own Paul Cunningham on Wednesday evening. And then on Thursday, a reading by the Hong Kong prose short story writer Dorothy Say. Is that next Thursday? Sorry, this is all very impromptu and a little disheveled and perhaps charming. And the good news is I am not the one doing the formal introduction. I'm here to be in the audience. But I am so happy to welcome all of the students and all the professors to tonight's reading by Alisha Dietzman, which is hosted for you very properly by our visiting poet, Cynthia Cruz. So Professor Cruz, come on up. Please do the honors.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to read a little thing. It's about 5 minutes. I was told it could be 5 minutes, but then I forgot to put the bio in, so it's going to be like 6 minutes. That's okay. So I'm so excited to hear you read, Alisha. So first and foremost, Alisha Dietzman's work engages with the dialectic. If any of my students are here, you've been hearing that endlessly. The poems are constructed upon a structure of positing and reflecting or working through, a process akin to the psychoanalytic act or Hegel's conception of Aufhebung. This approaching and working through contradiction brings something entirely new to the fore. Victoria Chang says as much in an introduction to Sweet Movie. This is what she says. The poet's mind opens with the possibilities of language and leaping when perceiving things in the world, as if to say correspondence is a way to make or revise the self in thinking. Many of the poems in Sweet Repetition begin by looking, are interrupted by self-reflection, and end with transformed perception. Indeed, what Chang refers to as Dietzman's leaping can be understood to be the moment of madness that occurs when one engages in the dialectic. When one truly looks, one is overcome by unknowing, because when we really look at something, the thing becomes undone by language, and what it truly is becomes apparent. At the same time, in this moment, what we knew a few moments before vanishes. And in this threshold between losing what one thought one knew and not yet knowing, one knows nothing. This temporary drop into knowing nothing is, as Dietzman writes, a leap into the void. Entering not knowing, or put another way, setting aside what one thinks one knows before looking is crucial. If we think we already know, this aspect of already knowing circumvents our ability to know anything. Relentless curiosity and an unabashed willingness to enter the shame of not knowing are intrinsic to this practice. Shame is a sign of humanity. It is that which preserves the human subject from becoming inhumane. Or as Dietzman writes in Yet, there is nothing beautiful without shame, and almost nothing without shame. And later in the collection, insisting in Holy Sonnets, it is difficult to explain, I do not hate my shame, I return to it as a dog. Like shame, like unknowing, the act of looking is also inherent to the collection. The poet can't, as she writes, stop looking. Dietzman's poems show us the material world as it is. In this way, the poems are political, because they help us break out of our routinized ways of seeing, or rather, not seeing the world, redirecting us to what is. As when, describing the flatness of the tourist site that has become an object, deterring its visitors from seeing what stands before them, Dietzman writes, in the margin of floating structure, near home in the Europe of my childhood at the ossuary, the tourists wonder how it all became so touched. And why does everyone have the same ideas, they ask. Come with me, the speaker beckons, leading the reader to the material world beneath the semblance ossified by the consumerism of tourism. As she writes, Habsburg's park design somewhere beneath our meeting. How do you say this with more breath? A plague burial. I discovered Alisha's work as a judge for the Poetry Society of America's Alice Faye de Castagnola Award. Reading through the pile of submissions, I was struck by their sameness, the way the poems were written as though detached from the material world the poets lived in. When I came across Dietzman's manuscript, I was pleasantly shocked. The work was surprising, making unexpected connections, and yet intimate, intelligent, and most of all, the poems felt as though they had to have been written. There was a force or a source radiating out from within them. The poems Dietzman submitted are from her current manuscript, XO, I will now read one of the poems from her submission, from the manuscript. XOXO. Always means eternally. Texaco stations of the cross. Highway hotel. Room like a room, unlike any other room. Tissue dispenser built in. Chrome saliva, strangely beautiful. You watching aliens. The poem ends with the following quotation from Alain Badiou, cluing us into how we might understand, or rather not attempt to understand the poem. And this is the citation that's at the end of the poem. The rule is simple: to enter into the poem, not in order to know what it means, but rather to think what happens in it. Because the poem is an operation, it is also an event. The poem takes place. The superficial enigma points to this taking place. It offers us a taking place in language. The poems are, in other words, what Badiou refers to as an event or world-changing occurrence that collapses everything one thought one knew before its appearance. An event, or poem by Alisha Dietzman, is an operation we pass through. It is the event or the poem itself that transforms us. As we pass through it, we are irrevocably changed. And now the bio, I forgot to put in the intro. I have it in here. Very important. Alisha Dietzman is the author of Sweet Movie, selected by Victoria Chang for the National Poetry Series, a finalist for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Oregon Book Awards. Sweet Movie was also shortlisted for the John Pollard Foundation International Poetry Prize. Her chapbook, Slow Motion Something for No Reason, was the editor's choice selection for the Tomaž Šalamun Prize. She received her MFA in poetry from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and her PhD in Divinity from the University of St. Andrews, where she wrote a thesis examining ethics and contemporary art, supported by a grant from the US-UK Fulbright Commission. Her creative and critical work has also received support from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Rebecca Swift Foundation, the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund, and the Jeffrey Rubinoff Sculpture Park. In 2025, her manuscript-in-progress, XOXO, was selected by me for the Poetry Society of America's Alisha de Castagnola Award, and her short story, California, was named a runner-up for the Desperate Literature Short Fiction Prize, raised between Columbia, South Carolina, and Prague, Czechia. She now lives in Oregon. Please help me welcome Alisha Dietzman.
Hello, can you all hear me okay? Okay, I'm a little bit soft-spoken, so you can just like wave your arms at me if you can't hear me. You also speak really quickly, so if you're like, Alisha, slow down, you can wave your arms to let me know that too. I'm really honored to be here, and thank you, Cynthia, for that introduction, which is like the kindest possible introduction. And you read one of the poems I was going to read, so I don't have to read it now, which is great. I told my family that I was going to be here at Notre Dame, and my dad, who's like a real like sports guy, I think he went to college on a baseball scholarship, and like he has never been impressed by a single thing I have done ever in my life, and he was like, wow, Notre Dame though, that's a good football school, so thank you also for letting me impress my dad. It means a lot to me. Okay, I'm gonna read some poems from Sweet Movie, and I'm gonna read some love poems, because I love love poems, and also because it's Valentine's Day soon, but we won't start with love poems, we're gonna start a little darker. Okay, so I have these poems called Museums. There's two of them in here, and they were written while I was teaching in Lithuania. And I wrote my dissertation on contemporary visual art, and the museums there were incredible, and this is kind of about my experience of the museums. Okay, so museums. Did you not pour me out like milk? Gustav's Glitzit's life cutouts, bayonet, ruby, hollow-bodied woman in the photograph, bruised canister, directions in case, and little red fire alarms. Once I screamed at you to know I am capable of screaming when called upon, that in urgent situations I might could. Anyway, nobody reads history anymore. A hog-tied horse. Are you interested in violence or are you bored? Both yeses, immoral. I have heard that even with a gun to your head, your consent is yours. Folk skirt floating, no legs, no waist, maybe 30 dresses, I can't count, and found florals without comment, the marble heads of dozens in state, man-eating pearls, possibly, sacrificial vertebrae, ration, a single Vermeer, Klutzius again, his long-armed, beautiful Lenin. Gustav's Klutzius is shot by the NKVD in winter. I think about this for days, that nothing saves some of us. More paintings, abstract hydrangeas in front of a house burning. In the video installation, a woman, the clients like all cavities. Print of stacked cabbages from a distance, a wet pane of glass and a lilac growing back through the window. Another museums too. Did you not pour me out like milk? On floor 2, an attendant listens to bombs going off all day. Outside Tallinn in the wasp fields shaking, a caved building like a valve. A blue forest with men picking mushrooms. The band on the commuter ferry sings party rock to violent applause. We're sieves, a series of narrative leaps. A middle-aged woman dancing like smoke. God has such mercy on us. Okay. And then I think I'm going to read a little ekphrastic poem, which also kind of engages with mercy, God's mercy. And it's from the Healing Laying On of Hands ceremony, a photograph by Russell Lee that's from a faith healing in Appalachia. First photograph, well, there's 2 photographs, I should say. A man flails, his white eyes and snake neck head white. Again I say, as if rejoice. A girl on her knees. The other men, dogwood. There would be a human smell, salt as with you, though with you a little sap. Their hands cut the air, one his blur, come out spirit-like. I notice the ceiling is low. I notice the girl has a ribbon curled around her hair. I notice God does not let us go. Second photograph. Another girl, on her head a crown of hams. I notice, what do they say? Sensuous details? Fleeting, small dress. I imagine light blue. Belt buckle like a jawline. Jawlines. No higher resolution. Once a man pulled me from the service, claimed he saw God all over me like milk. And why was I so afraid of God, of his hands here and elsewhere? Why did I fear mercy? And we're gonna do some love poems now, as I promised earlier. I have a lot of love poems in here that are like by the light of something, and these are they're by several lights. The first one's by the light of the desert, and they were written while I was living in Eastern Washington, which I've been informed is not a true desert, but allow me. It felt very desert-like to me as someone from South Carolina. So a love poem by the light of the desert. I didn't expect the desert. It's long form. We took ourselves to water. I cannot say everything was beautiful, but mostly yes. I'm grateful for the names of God we are allowed to speak and the hidden. We didn't intend to see them fucking among the trees as dear to me in my particular way. I've rejected certain discourses. I've accepted certain discourses. A man you work with tells me he knows everything there is to know about religion. I practice a certain docility in my discourses. I tell you again and again, the desert, something dead already, resurrected, the tightly metered voice calling out kidnappings, the weather, mildly apocalyptic all June. In the river, you were cold in my mouth. Love poem by Yellow Light. July, loose dress. Outside the town, sage on fire. Smells like sugar, money. The man you work with burning sage, dousing sage, tells me he knows everything there is to know about religion, and none of it good. We're in a bar on Taco Tuesday. Beside him, someone keeps saying softly he's killed a cougar. Beside him, yellow vinyl reflects yellow. Uneasy glasses. Michel Pastoureau devotes himself entirely to the study of color. First and foremost, a social phenomenon. Yellow is the least loved color in most socials. Per Pastoureau. My hands slide down my glass, cold-blooded as airports. The man tells me he's going on a date. He does not know the woman. He tells me they will undress together and run through the rooms of her quiet house somewhere in Idaho. 2 pale verses. A little poem. 2 pale verses. My mother asks if I'm reading Jeremiah. A man on break from Winco watches me comb my hair. I'm gonna actually read some new work now, which I'm excited about, that I have never, ever read in public, so bear with me. So I'm working on a second manuscript right now, or I guess it's finished, we'll see, called XOXO, and Cynthia already read the first poem in it, which is lovely. And I'm gonna read a section from it. It's either, I always, first poem is kind of a funny thing to say, because it's either all one poem or a series of tiny poems. I haven't decided which it is, but all the poems are all the poems or the poem, it's all XOXO all the way through. And this is kind of a love poem. The section starts out with a little quote from Lacan. I was kind of like, I always say that I write fan books. I write like responsively to like what I'm reading or watching, and that's like, you know, it might be about Vanderpump Rules, it might be about Big Love, it might be about Lacan, just kind of whatever I'm consuming. And so throughout this, I have kind of scattered quotations from texts that I was engaging with when I wrote that section. So, you never look at me from the place I see you. All right. Oh. The summer after you tell X that you love her, I'm reading Bologna in the city where we fell in love. In 2666, the medical examiner calls human nature a mystery. Why did the murderer dress the unclaimed body in 2 pairs of pants? In the gallery, I look at a Jiří collage until I feel nauseous. I stare at a photograph of a man naked, bent over a table. Once I wrote about the gorgeous vulnerability of the human form. I was writing about art for a degree. X. The most beautiful woman I've ever touched is your former student who takes us to the Kunsthal to see Nan Goldin's Ballad of Sexual Dependency. It's green that day, and it smells like water. My world is empty without you plays, and I watch her face. I watch the light on her face. Oh, your former student rolls 3 cigarettes. She arranges them on her thigh like swans. X. I like Goldin's images of men, violent, glossy. Agnes Varda says it is important for women to look, so I watch you smoke through the window, unnaturally far from the building. You've lived most of your life with such precision. Maybe I watch you smoke through the window in the way you say you like the mediated experience of watching the videos you make of me. I want to write that I do not want to look at myself, but I want to look at myself, naked and strange, my mouth a miniskirt, blunt, empty. Oh, in Goldin's the hug, an arm bisects a blue dress. These pages are all stuck together, sorry. X, XX, grapefruits, silicone, force meat pharmacons wet with God. For Agnes, I tried to look at men like Pasolini looks at men. Oh, Jiří Kolář is interested in how things end. This makes me think of the dumb Paz quote about how a kiss is always a beginning between 2 people. I don't want to think about beginnings between 2 people or ends. I want to drink until I vomit in the bathroom of the bar where our legs touch under the table. X. In Goldin's Philippe H. and Suzanne kissing at Euthanasia NYC, the desire of one subject obscures the other subject. Oh. In your former student's apartment, cucumbers, a postcard from Kazakhstan, cherries, always small bowl after small bowl. In Goldin's Rise and Monty NYC, the subjects touch each other as if touching snow. We look at her paintings of nipples, a dog. We drink the wine her grandfather made. We drink 3 bottles. At some point, she turns on a light. At some point, we say, it's late. At some point, we gather the glasses. X. Memory, the wet slats of a pool chair, give under our weight. Oh, you don't like the first and last tale in the immoral tales. You like the middle 2 tales. 1, a damned Charlotte at Alexandra masturbates to God. 2, Elizabeth Bathory bathes in the blood of teenage girls newly drained. X. You like the cover of immoral tales, birthday pink, the inside of anything, our more sexual saints, arched. You like it when I touch my mouth. Oh, in the city where we fell in love, a portrait of Václav Havel. X. Memory, the grass on my back in the orchard. This is before your father's death. Oh, in the city where we fell in love, another portrait of Václav Havel. In the city where we fell in love, we're listening to Jane's Addiction. We're listening to Wonderwall. We're listening to a club remix of Wonderwall under a portrait of Václav Havel. X. I buy a fur hat. You photograph me in a fur hat. You rearrange me on various surfaces. There is always this problem of light. Oh. For your birthday, X gives you a book on Romer. I imagine she considers herself the ingenue in any one of his movies. I'm getting older. When you tell me I have nothing interesting to say, I think I said, you're breaking my heart. X. Between us, a car length, cinematic, dead silence, submarine. A woman in an ordinary dress asks, okay, as she touches your arm, your wrist, rolls the sleeve of your white shirt. By the river, you're reading Junger. The students day drink in their forest. I have nothing left, I keep saying to you, on a stranger's floor, undoing your white shirt. Oh. I'm not precise. Somewhere a bird or a dog sings. Why can't a dog sing? Somewhere in a censor's erase lines of text. We are in history. Don't be angry when I say censor. Failed. Utopia. X. At the brutalist bus station where they destroyed the statues. In the late 70s, interior, bad velvet, everything shaking, concerto. What did you say? There's something so un-American about classical music. Outside by a bus headed to a war zone, a man and a woman hold each other. The man gets on the bus. It's easy to make images of people, poetic economizing of all spheres. Death transition to you, spasmed, sexually. On a screen, two girls swimming. Their wet, unadorned arms make me think of pounds count to 3 again. Again, I am thinking of Nevada somehow, hot and dead. Oh. Golden tells us she wanted to make a record of my life that nobody could revise. Not a safe, clean version, but instead an account of what things really looked like, and felt like, and smelled like. I am looking at a memorial for a man who died in the uprising, Yaroslav Šimeček. If I slide my tongue under any of your nails, I taste garlic. You have put vinegar in my ear each day for days while I lay on my side. You brush my hair from my neck. I have to think of you in a forest. X. I have to think of you at 7-Eleven. I have to think of you watching Charlotte Alexandra masturbate to God. I have to think of you masturbating to Charlotte Alexandra masturbating to God. Oh, I have to think of you in a forest. And that's that. Thank you for bearing with me through that very long sequence. Gosh, I don't know what time I have. Am I? Should I? Thank you all so much, and I appreciate it enormously. And I will read one last little tiny section, and then we'll call it good. I think short readings are great. So I'm going to read the very end of XOXO to y'all. X. Cropland and dayglow, cough drop, signage. This fleeting state, you, precipice. Hide not thyself, bleached leaflet, fantasy collectibles. At the counter you buy me a lighter with a running horse. Oh, in the forest, Eames trees, birch, 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 movie green, white at the waist, distant pop music, prop wisteria, hairless morning, sweetened, condensed. You're a clearing, milk. I am coming to see. You're a clearing. Now we've got a little Milton here. Whom fleest thou, whom thou fleest, of him thou art, his flesh, his bone, to give thee being I lent, out of my side to thee, nearest my heart. X. Grease fire, fertilizer, pellet blue morning, driving west, wild fields, plains. Why always west? Why always eternally, fleeing from my point of origin in a latex June? Stray cherries, stain the interior, nearest my heart. Oh. On earth, O Shulamite, water dreams of contrast. In heaven, water dreams of nothing. X. Beloved Shulamite. Oh, hush outside the tent where we're somewhere at the edge of the desert. I don't understand landscapes, only the feelings they give me come out clean, wet, surefire. Everything looks like a screen, but not with you, not here, somewhere, hushed, borderline green. Horses interface the parking lot. Eternally nearest my heart, beloved, Shulamite at the edge of the desert. Thank you all so much for your attention.
If there are questions, will you try to answer them?
Yes, of course, I will try to answer them.
We're talking about like sectioning our work in class right now, and I felt like your sections were really smooth and felt very natural, and I was just wondering if you had any tips for dividing your work into pieces.
This is a challenge for me, honestly, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it because I'm not the most like logical person, which I think is probably a lot of poets aren't. So I don't have like a good sort of like easy answer for that other than just like spending a lot of time with the text, and like I printed out a lot, which I know is like expensive and annoying, but also it does really help just like literally interact with it like physically, have that kind of tactile experience and just like rearrange things on the floor and on the wall. I think with Sweet Movie, it was 9 years from when I first started sending it out until when it was picked up, and I would just kind of edit it every single time it was rejected, which was a lot of editing and a lot of throwing out work and maybe kind of a ridiculous thing to do. But every time I did that, I would kind of revision like what it was doing, and I do think the final product was the best. And I ended up, because there's so much like life that happened, you know, I started writing when I was 25 and it was picked up when I was 34. There was just a huge kind of shift in who I was, you know, and I think that kind of became the narrative arc, and that became a lot of the transition. It was sort of like, you know, I think what feels natural to you in the writing is probably what's going to feel natural to the reader. Not always, but for me, I think, you know, a lot of the earliest poems I wrote are in the front of the book, and then the last ones are the last poems I wrote. So.
Awesome, thank you.
This might be a weird question, but it's really vague. So, what's your relationship to language? Because the words here are so interesting, and they seem kind of like geometrical, like you're building something. So I wonder kind of your relationship to that.
Okay, I love that question. And I love words. I grew up, you know, like cross-culturally and speaking more than one language, although my Czech now is terrible. But I think that like that was probably an early kind of like interest in language and the significance of it. I also watched my dad learn Czech in his 40s, which is very challenging. And actually, I think some people would say almost impossible. But he did, and he was very like he would sit down with like his you know, his vocabulary words. He also would talk all the time to like he'd go to people's like older people's homes and they would sit with him and talk to him in Czech, and that was how he learned. And I think that made me maybe appreciate like the significance of language. And I don't know, it's just always been something I'm obsessed with. And I'm a pretty obsessive person. I don't know. I think in terms of like how I engage with language now and like how I try to like build things in my poems, I do a lot of like I have tons of little like journals, little notebooks, and also I just use my phone sometimes too, and I write every single time something strikes me as interesting at all. Like I you know, little bits of conversations I hear because I eavesdrop, things that, you know, I've been reading like a technical text of some sort, or like watching TV, or I read a psalm every day and I just pull language from that, and then I kind of like to mash it all together and see what happens. Yeah, I really believe that like I love like unexpected, like trying to find these unexpected relationships between words that you wouldn't have thought had a relationship or could have a relationship.
I love that.
Do you pick like the titles of your poems before kind of writing them, or
No.
like, how does
No.
that work?
I think some people do, and I think they might be stronger writers than me sometimes because they start out with that intentionality. But I'm a pretty like gut level person. I write very like I feel like it's pretty received for me, and I have to go back and sometimes think about what I was feeling at the time. All the exception being to XOXO, obviously, because I had that little X and O structure, which made it a lot easier. I will say, like, well, that's the title, done. You know, we're
So
that has even more. We were just wondering on like a technical level, how was that intuitive as you were going along with the footnotes? And like when did the footnotes come along, and like how do you think of the whole shape, kind of cubit shape of those poems?
I wrote those poems when I was writing my dissertation, and I was engaging with a lot of footnotes. And something that I did a lot, I'm kind of like, I don't want to say like a docile person or I'm a person that I think is not necessarily super assertive in the way that I communicate. And I found that was a challenge when I was writing my dissertation, and I was hiding all of my my kind of ideas and arguments, especially like the really like controversial ones in the footnotes, which my advisor pointed out. But then he also was kind of like, that's like a method though, to kind of hide the really like the force of your argument in the footnotes. And I started to think about that with poems, like what if like the real poem was in like a footnote, and I think that that's part of what I was kind of trying to do there. And actually, I literally I wrote one of my dissertation chapters was about Marlene Dumas, so I was like literally like writing the dissertation chapter and then also kind of doing these poems about Marlene Dumas, and it was a really they're almost like I think a distilled version in some ways of some of the arguments I'm making in the dissertation. So it's, in the back first, and then
Yeah, so I'm currently taking a course, Introduction to Poetry. I don't have that much knowledge on poetry, but I do have some interest in it. So I'm curious, when you write these poems, is it like impromptu, or is it just, or do you have to find yourself like a calm setting, sit down and plan it all out?
I know a lot of poets who have like a great like daily practice, where they sit down and they write and they. I'm not that poet, I do feel like it for me. It just like it just comes sometimes. And I always like I say received, but I feel like I really have this like I just have to kind of wait until I feel like ready to write something. And if I try to force it, it's never any good. But again, like a lot of poets will have a different practice, and they're like, I need to write every day, and that's really beneficial for me. But I don't know where poems come from. I just like say that I like pray for the poems, and that works sometimes. But yeah, I have no good answer that's like not a little bit mystical and weird. We'll come back here.
It was really great to hear like some from your excerpt from XOXO, especially from the beginning and the end. Thinking about that in comparison to the movie, and you talked about like phrases, and you talked about that earlier today, like being an important part of your work in general. But what's the relationship with phrases in XOXO? Because it feels very different to, or maybe you don't see it like that.
No, I think it is less focused on phrases. There's definitely like I have like the Nan Golden and stuff in there, so there's definitely some of that. But I think it's probably a little less focused on phrases. I think I mentioned this to y'all this morning in class that I think that ekphrasis for me was a way to get at the self without speaking directly about the self, because that was really anxiety inducing for me, and I'm kind of a private person. XOXO is very revealing and like a little more like I'm opening up a little bit more in XOXO, and I think so I think it's almost like the need for ekphrasis was like lessened for me, but I still goodness like love it as a form. Like I think it is so generative for me. Like if there is one thing actually to like the question in the back that I just answered about, like if there's one thing that often stimulates poetry for me, it is looking at art. And I mean art like anything, like I'm like I've written many poems about reality TV, I think almost anything can kind of be the subject for that kind of intense looking. So.
Yeah, I have a very simple question that has to be asked today, like in general. So your poetry collection is called Sweet Movie. What's your favorite movie? And did it influence your writing? Like, what's the correlation there?
Oh gosh. Sweet Movie is one of my favorite movies, actually, by Dusan Makaviev. It's a weird movie. That's like I hesitate to recommend it. Don't judge me. But honestly, Love Affair: The Case of the Missing Switchboard Operator, also by Makaviev, is just a masterpiece. It's really great. It's a beautiful movie, and it's a little more legible and less like fecal. I also really love like my like silly. I love Hot Rod. I really like that movie. I think it's kind of it has a special place in my heart. Oh, okay. Also, Markéta Lazarova is a Czech, Czech New Wave, but it's not like what you think of as Czech New Wave at all. It's a really great movie. And Daisies, another Czech New Wave. Markéta Lazarova, it's like Markéta, and then it's phonetic. Markéta, yeah. Lazarova. Like laser and then OVA. Or laser. I don't remember. Don't ask me to spell anything. It's
So talking about influences and mentioning Czech again, I thought I heard references to unbearable lightness of being in XO poems. It was the posing in the hat. And
Yeah,
you use
yeah.
the word lightness, and you're standing under a portrait of Havel. Is that okay?
Okay, that wasn't
I
intentional.
that.
But no, that's funny because I wrote a whole essay about like Kundera's kind of like weird influence on me, and I talked about like the hat and the gosh, that's really funny.
It was a fur hat though, not a bowler hat.
Yeah. Yes. That's a great observation though, because part of the point of the essay was that Kundera is always kind of like lurking. You know, he's not like the influence I go to, and I'm like, yeah, I love Milan Kundera, but like he really did impact me, I think. So.
I have another relationship question for you, but how do you relate to trash in your poetry?
This is I'm trying to think of it. I love like found things, and I love one of the assignments that I always like when I get to teach poetry, they try to encourage students to like go to a space like like a gas station or like mega church, Target, whatever, some sort of space that we don't think of as like aesthetic, and engage with that, use only the language that they find there. So I think that like the trash and sort of like found, I love that. I think I probably like, I'm just starting to kind of unpack the ways too that maybe like even thinking about like class in my work probably influences like my desire to kind of think about these sort of like objects that we think of as like unbeautiful, but that's a work in progress. So I haven't quite fleshed that out. All the questions? Oh yeah.
I heard from Professor Cruz earlier today that you're working on a novel, and I was wondering if you would like talk about it at all.
I've written 2 novels. Well, one we're going to say I have not really, one I'm writing, and because I'm a poet, that's a real undertaking. The one that I'm writing is called Strange Country, and it's kind of about this sort of like Lynchian like director who goes into the desert to make his final film, and he wants it to be. It's about a reality TV show that like features a like fundamentalist polygamist looking for like a third wife. So it's kind of The Bachelor-ish. And it's a mess right now, but it's really fun. I think I like working. I like the working those different muscles because I do think poetry and prose for me are really different muscles, and it's been really really fun for me and really challenging and makes me respect prose a lot more. Which is great. Yeah, I don't know. I wrote another little one that is probably more poetry than prose, and it's called Ecstasy, and it was about it's written in it's like it's like a crown of sonnets, but it's a crown of prose vignettes, and it's about like there's a Czech photographer, Miroslav Tichy, who like lived in this tiny town, and he made his own cameras and photographed the people in the town and developed the images. He photographed mostly women, and he was like being observed by the state like under communism while he was like observing these women like without their consent. And it's it's kind of written from his perspective and also the women he photographs. And that one was that was like my bridge, It was like kind of like, okay, we're gonna sneak from poetry into prose, and it might just be poetry, but I call it prose. truthfully, I don't know if I care a whole lot about the distinction. You know, I do think that like poetry, I'm stealing this from someone. I the longest time my students would ask what makes a poem, and I was just like, I don't know. It's just something. I don't know. You know, and someone I knew who's a Miltonist, and he was like, well, it's about the line, you know, and I was like, okay, that's good. I'm just gonna say it's about when it's more focused on work that's more focused on the line. I think that to me is poetry, but I'm not super invested in the distinction. All right, should we call it? I appreciate you all so much. Really.